Okay, we are live. Welcome to the About the Labor Show. I'm your host, Sean Borman. With me, as always, is Nick Olson. Nick does some great work for Vikings territory. Had a great piece on the offensive line today and how the Vikings could go about addressing it, and also does some work for zone coverage. But Nick, I loved your piece on the offensive line.
Thanks. It's tough finding some reasons for hope there, but I do think there's a path forward where things can get better.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a topic for a whole other conversation. But and I can't wait to get into it. But today we're going to talk a little Anthony Barr, kind of a polarizing topic in Vikings land. About regarding this offseason and if they'll be able to resign him and should they resign him. And I know you've had a couple really good tweets about it. Let's start. I kind of want to start with your devil's advocate tweet. Why not to re-sign Anthony Barr? Because
Sure.
like we talked about, it is a polarizing subject. And I would say, based off, I've actually seen a couple polls on Daily Norseman and other sites where most fans kind of don't want to re-sign Barr. So let's get into that. Your first point, well, I'll kind of let you take it over the reins here. I know you said in your tweet he's inconsistent, he's good, but not elite. So
Sure.
why don't we start there, and we'll go from there.
Sure. When we drafted Anthony Barr, he had a fantastic rookie season. Was a little inconsistent, but had some highlight reel plays. He had the game winner, the walk-off scoop and score. I think it was against the Falcons. Some other big plays, and he was Mike Zimmer's first pick, so there's a lot of excitement for him. And then 2015, he just broke out like he was the next Luke Kuechly. He was that good. He was fantastic in every facet of the game, all three phases: pass coverage, pass rushing, run defense. He was all over the place. And then, so we thought we really had this amazing building block. And then 2016, he was awful. It was injuries or something. Mike Zimmer came out publicly and said he tends to coast sometimes, and it was really bad. He went from being like Pro Football Focus's number 1 or number 2 linebacker to like number 50 out of 50 or something. It was really bad. And then he was a little up and down the year before, and then this past year, there are different ways to look at it. He had a good overall grade, but he wasn't, a Pro Bowler. He wasn't Kuechly or Bobby Wagner or even like Leighton Vander Esch or somebody. So it's tough to see. It's tough to say with that kind of inconsistency and how limited the Vikings cap space is going into next year, that they should hand him out a gigantic contract for, $12 million or whatever a year. So that inconsistency is part of the reason why you can maybe feel a little bit better about letting him go. The next thing is, Rick Spielman has done a fantastic job funneling a lot of talent to Mike Zimmer, and a lot of first-round picks, a lot of second-round picks to the defense, a lot of high-profile free agents, Linval Joseph, Sheldon Richardson, some of the nickelbacks we've had in the past years. And at some point you have to say, okay, Zimmer, you've got plenty of toys in that backfield, but you shouldn't need first-round talent at every single position in the defense. We brought you in, you're a defensive guru, and nobody will deny that after, being top 5 in defensive DVOA the past 2 years, after having the number 1 third down rate, stop rate in the NFL, and the best one since the 70s in NFL history. So we get that you're good at this, but you shouldn't need first rounders everywhere to do it. And, part of being able to have it's part of the value in having such a talented defensive schemer is that you don't need top tier talent everywhere to have an effective defense. So that's another reason why you would think, between Eric Wilson, between Ben Gideon, between some of the other guys, maybe somebody in the draft, Zimmer should be able to scheme around not having Anthony Barr. So that's reason number 2. Reason number 3 is that, if you're going to not invest in any level of the defense, everybody knows the pass rush matters. And a lot of people think coverage matters just as much. Some people say coverage matters even more than pass rush does, because if it's a passing league, and if you want to stop the pass, you can scheme around pass rushers. You can double team guys with a shutdown cornerback or an elite secondary. There's nothing you can do because guys just aren't going to be getting open. There's not going to be windows for your quarterback to hit as much. So those two matter. Linebackers, they help a lot on. They help a lot in coverage. They muck up passing lanes. They cover running backs and tight ends sometimes. and they're important in run defense. But if there's an area where you're not going to break the bank, it should be the linebacker level. So that's, reason number 3. Number 4 is just, the cap space. We've got $8 million going into next year, a little less than that from what we've already got on the books and our 2018 rollover. And we still have to sign, there's Sheldon Richardson, there's Anthony Barr, there's Matt Wild, there's Dan Bailey or whoever the kicker is going to be. There's Marcus Sherrills, there's Tom Compton, there's Nick Easton, there's Tom Johnson, and on and on and on and on. There's Anthony Harris, and $8 million. That's going to be tough. And maybe we can cut Sendejo and restructure Remmers and maybe even do something like restructure Reef or Everson Griffin or Linval Joseph, but that can only really get you so far. And are we in a position to be handing out a gigantic $50 million plus contract to Anthony Barr? It would be tough to work. And then, the last reason is that, okay, if we do let Barr walk, somebody else is going to end up paying him $12, $13 million a year, something like that. That gets us a compensatory third-round pick for 2020. So, if that were the case, then, we would be getting a draft pick coming away from it as well. So, you'd lose an Anthony Barr, but you get basically a very late round third pick or a very late third round pick. That's, you can get something pretty talented with a compensatory third. So that would help soften the blow, I think. So that's probably my reason against it. If I were trying to make the argument for why the front office should move on from Barr.
And all pretty good points. Let's be real. They're all pretty good points. And money is an issue this year, unlike last year. And the thing that I guess worries me a little bit in that circumstance, if you do let him go, it is nice getting that compensatory pick, but how do they replace him? You brought up Eric Wilson, who would probably be a pretty good, replacement, but he's no Anthony Barr, I guess. He's not going to bring that presence, with the double-A cap look. I don't think teams would be quite as intimidated with that. Where do you think the Vikings could go to replace Barr if that were to be the case?
Yeah, Eric Wilson, I really like Eric Wilson as a player. And, it's funny, if we re-sign Barr instead of Eric Kendricks, I would be happy letting Eric Kendricks walk and replacing him with Eric Wilson, because I think Wilson can be a very fantastic wheel linebacker, weak side linebacker, but he's not a Sam. Strong side linebacker has to be able to set the edge, take on tight ends and blocking. And Anthony Barr is 6'5", 255 pounds. Eric Wilson is 5 inches shorter than that and like 50 pounds less than that. So it's not a perfect replacement, but some combination of him and Ben Gideon, if you're going off only roster. We've had games where Anthony Barr has been hurt, hasn't been able to play, and that's who you've been seeing mainly taking those snaps. So it wouldn't be perfect. You'd have to scheme around it a little bit. Defense would be a little bit worse off for it, but you could manage.
And I guess along those lines, is there anybody in the draft that you've seen that is a possible replacement? I guess I haven't really looked much, to be honest. Everybody keeps talking about, was it Josh Allen? But he'll be gone right
Josh
away.
Allen, I think that's an edge prospect who's supposed to go top 5, top 10. People point to Mac Wilson. That's somebody who's supposed to be at the middle, late of the first, maybe even top of the second. There are a few guys in the draft who you could point to and say, there's a perfect Barr replacement. Problem is we've got some big holes at guard. We've got some big holes at defensive tackle if we don't bring Sheldon Richardson back. Some of the other guys on the roster are getting older, and you always want to be able to be in a position to take the best player available, so you're not reaching on a Christian Bonder or something. So it's tough to balance that need with everything else that's going to be needed to fill on the roster.
And that's kind of where I hop in, and as most of our readers know, I'm a big Anthony Barr fan. I had that article not too long ago, Let's Settle the Anthony Barr Debate. I think the Vikings should try really hard to re-sign him. I think they should do whatever it takes to do that because, like you've said, the team does have holes on the offensive line. And if you get rid of an established player already on the defensive side of the ball, that's just another need that they're going to have to address at some point in the offseason. So yeah. I think it would be a little counterproductive. I get the whole money aspect. He's going to want a ton of money. There's no beating around the bush there. But at the same time, I think the Vikings can figure it out with Rob Brzezinski and the cap management team that the Vikings have, which is one of the best in the league. I guess going and to further go down that road, what are the positives? Why would you want to re-sign Anthony Barr?
Yeah, so I made the case for why we might want to move on from him, but personally, I believe the Vikings should re-sign him. I think he's a good enough player to be worth the contract we'd be giving him. I don't think you let somebody as rare and talented and special as Barr out the door. So the reason you do keep him is I do think he's a little underrated in just how much value he provides the defense. A lot of the things he does are not the kind of things you see on the broadcast angles. They're the kind of things that he's setting up other players to do their jobs. He's a captain of the defense. He wears the green dot, meaning before every play, it's Mike Zimmer who gives him the play call to communicate to the rest of the defensive huddle. He's the one who fixes the assignment when the offense goes in motion. Anthony Barr is the one telling the defensive line, hey, Griff, kick out from the 7 to the 9, widen your technique, rush from a little wider because now their tight end is in line or something. He's the one communicating assignments to the rest of the defense. He's the one who's kind of making a lot of the pre-snap blitz calls. So he's a very smart player, and he's a very good communicator. And that's a big reason why the Zimmer defense functions, why it clicks. We have seen in games where Barr's missed it. Kendricks has done a good job with it too. But I think that continuity matters a lot, and I know that Barr does a fantastic job at it, so I'd worry about losing that. I do think, the Pro Football Focus grades, they're good, but I don't think they quite capture just how talented he is and the things he can do that other people can't. See, he's 6'5", that's about as tall as any linebacker in the NFL. He's blazing fast. He can explode from sideline to sideline. And if you want to do the double A gap look, you need a linebacker. You need two linebackers who can cover from the A gap before the snap to the flat immediately after snap. Otherwise, you're going to get running backs running wheel routes, running into the flats, and they'll burn you every time. You can't really run that double A gap look unless you have linebackers athletic enough to cover sideline to sideline. Barr can do that. I'm not sure Ben Gideon can. Eric Wilson might be able to, but Eric Wilson he can't get off blocks, and so he's a poor run defender in a lot of ways, and he just doesn't have the size that Anthony Barr does. Barr has this unique combination of being huge, 6'5", 255 pounds, but explosive, super fast. He's kind of like Danielle Hunter in that he's just this outstanding, freak specimen of an athlete. So, and that reflects in a lot of his stats too. Maybe not his Pro Football Focus grades, but he had the second best yards allowed per coverage snap in the NFL among all linebackers. He had the third best yards. He had the third best targets per coverage snap. So in coverage, he never gets targeted. He never gets really thrown at. He was third at and catches allowed per coverage snap. And when he does get targeted, he doesn't give up very many yards because he's very fast. He's a good tackler. He doesn't give up a lot of coverage stats. Part of that's because the Vikings don't ask him to do a ton in coverage. It's a lot of just chilling in the flats or in the hook zones, but the production is there. And then the other thing is he's just a fantastic pass rusher, and he's gotten better and better. He was the very best, the number one linebacker in pass rushing productivity among all linebackers. What that combination does for a player in Zimmer's defense is it allows Zimmer to be so versatile. It's like, how Harrison Smith can just do anything. You can line him up on the edge and he'll set the edge. You can put him as a deep covered center fielder and he'll cover the whole field. You can have him blitz. You can have him fake blitz and then drop back into coverage. He can play man coverage outside or inside in the slot. Barr's that same kind of crazy Swiss Army knife where he can pass rush and teams will treat him. Zimmer had a comment in a presser where teams say that we're just going to treat him like he's the other blitzer, he's the fifth blitzer, and we're playing like not a 4-3 team but a 3-4 team, and he's the other edge rusher like the Von Miller. So he's an extremely versatile player, and that really opens up Zimmer's playbook. And I do think on the cap point, yeah, it's going to hurt. But, it hurt when we had to extend Kendricks and Danielle Hunter. But guess what? They're worth it because they're really good players. Barr, I think, is in the same mold. And you can make it work for 2019 the same way we I think the first cap hit in Eric Kendricks, the cap hit for the first year of Eric Kendricks' contract is like $6 million. I think you can do the same thing with Anthony Barr, where you have a signing bonus, you spread it out. It's a little backloaded, not enough to constrain you, but enough to create a little bit of wiggle room in 2019. I think the Vikings can do that. I do think going forward, they'll probably let him test the market, and they'll just say, hey, let it give us a chance to make a competitive offer with whatever else you hear out there. And we'll see where it falls, because they probably don't want to pay him $13 million. They probably don't want to pay him edge rusher money. But, the top linebackers in the league make 10, 11 million, 12 million. If we can come away with that, I would say absolutely sign them up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about how they manipulated that first year in Kendrick's deal.
Yeah, you hear a lot of the cap hits work, and Rob Brzezinski does such a good job with that stuff that people like to joke that the cap isn't real. It's real, but you can massage it and work your way around it and figure out little tricks to make it all kind of fit together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on it earlier too. I mean, they've built this great defense, and if you lose such a key cog, in Barr, I think that's going to be pretty damaging long term. I feel like once you get past this off season, you get a lot more cap room next year, to put it bluntly. So it's kind of just getting past this off season, and then you're more or less in the clear. I kind of wanted to touch on this too, because I know Everson Griffin, you could save a lot of money by cutting him this year or restructuring, whatever you want to do. If the Vikings decide to move on from Griffin, let's say that they decide to cut him, you think there's any more, I guess, pass rushing snaps available for Barr? You think they could kind of move him up a little bit so he's rushing the quarterback more?
Actually, because I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, if they do use Griffin either in a reduced role or maybe they want to move on and start Weatherly, Barr is definitely somebody who could contribute a lot. Because honestly, do you remember how Danielle Hunter was in his second year, where the first year he came in and he kind of was like a fish out of water, didn't really know what he was doing, and he tried to beat guys with speed, but that was like his one move. And once people figure that out, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna play with speed, and you're not gonna be able to counter inside because you haven't really developed that technique yet. So that's all I have to worry about. That's kind of where Hunter was his first year, and then his second year he was like just starting to get the hang of things. He didn't really necessarily have an inside counter move or a full arsenal of pass rush moves that he had fully developed, but he was starting to beat people with more than just his speed. He was being able to bull rush people a little bit, and he was getting really good with his hands. That's what you're seeing from Barr. That's what you saw from Barr last year, where he was just more than just his speed and his power and his size. He's really good with his hands. He's really good at swatting defenders' hands or offensive linemen's hands or running backs' hands so that he can intercept them and swat them or push them away. He's getting very, very good with the hands fighting as part of a pass rusher. And part of that is just, having Andre Patterson as a coach on the staff to be able to, develop those techniques and work on his hands fighting. And so we saw a lot of development from him last year, and it shows. He was the most efficient pass rusher of any off-ball linebacker in the NFL. So if you can get him more of those pass rushing snaps, he would definitely make the most of them, I think. So to the extent you're losing that by losing Griffin, whether it's a reduced snap count or cutting him, yeah, I think Barr could be a big beneficiary and help out a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of just where my mind went, because I think they will have to make, a drastic move or two to create the necessary cap room to keep him. Let's say they're forced to franchise him, which nobody but me thinks that, is a possibility. I think that could be a possibility because he's going to get – I'd be surprised if he doesn't get a $100 million contract, honestly. He's 26 years old. He's going to have a ton of suitors. Everybody wants this guy. The Packers want this guy. The Raiders do. The Vikings are going to have to pay him a lot, I think.
He's good. The problem with the franchise tag is, linebackers, it's stupid, but linebackers are lumped together. The Anthony Barrs and the Dante Hightowers are lumped in together with the Von Millers and like the Khalil Macks, who are both technically linebackers, but like, come on, one is like lined up on the edge and is a pure pass rusher, and the other one is like the other one's like an inside linebacker basically. They line up off the ball for the majority of snaps. It's a very different position. And of course, Von Miller and Khalil Mack make like $20 million a year, and Dante Hightower makes like $10 million. So the problem with the franchise tag is it's based off the highest paid people at that position. So with Barr, you're paying a lot of money. So I'm not sure the franchise tag is all that useful for him, but I do think there are people out there. I think one team that would just love to have him is the Patriots. I think the Patriots look at Barr and say, you can do anything. The Patriots have this weird blend of a defense where they're kind of like a 4-3 defense, but they use their off-ball linebackers so much on the line that it's almost like a 3-4 position. Like Kyle Van Noy is kind of like a budget Anthony Barr. I think they would bring in Anthony Barr and be like, just do your thing, pass rush all the time, but also we'll use you a ton in coverage, and Bill Belichick could scheme up some like amazing things for Anthony Barr. So I think he's I bet I wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots went after him. The Packers want him. I think the 49ers will probably, anybody looking for a creative opportunity at edge rusher with some cap space will probably look at him. So he's going to have suitors.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the whole situation. I mean, we had last year with all three quarterbacks leaving an in-house free agency. Now this year we got the Barr Richardson deal. I think the Vikings, or at least I hope, the Vikings can make it work. I guess we'll see. I think a lot of the local beat writers see it as less and less of a possibility that he will be back. I know for a fact Ben Gessling doesn't really expect him to be back. So I'm fascinated by the whole situation. I'm glued to everything that comes out about Anthony Barr. So, yeah, and it was you, Nick, who really turned me around. I used to not think much about him, but until he had that really big struggle against the Rams out in LA when he just got torched that game, like I was about done with him. And then you kind of wisely, made the Twitter thread about him and how it was mainly based off scheme and not necessarily his fault. And that just blew my mind. I looked a lot more into it, and I totally changed my mind on Anthony Barr. And now I don't think the Vikings would be screwed without him, but they might be. I don't know for sure. So it'd be a big
really good example of a player who, if you're only watching, like if you're more of a casual fan, and that's perfectly fine. Honestly, it's probably healthier for you. And if you're more of a casual fan and you're only watching the TV games once or twice or tuning in and out, Barr looks like a player. It's like, what does this guy contribute to the team? But if you're really understanding Zimmer's scheme and what he's doing, and how Anthony Barr, what he's doing when he's not playing the ball, affects what everybody else can do. When you really dig into the advanced stats, how little he gives up in coverage and how effective he is when he's asked to rush the passer, you really start to understand just how valuable of a chess piece he is for Zimmer. So would love to have him back, but obviously we're not in a position to be handing out fat contracts to everybody. So it's a tough one. Could see it going both ways.
You and I are kind of both in the same. We both agree in that regard. Yeah. So that's it for today's episode. A nice quick one about Anthony Barr, but I'd like to also come back and maybe cover Sheldon Richardson and more off-season stuff. So we'll be talking to you guys and making another show soon. So Nick, thank you very much. We'll be talking to you soon.
Yep. Peace.
See you guys.